Hey everybody, it's Adam with Rebel 8 Marketing, and the content you are about to watch was originally created when I owned a previous marketing company called XYZ Marketing. That company has since evolved and joined the Rebel 8 Marketing brand. But the strategies and insights you're going to get from this video are just as relevant today as they were when I filmed it then. I believe that this content is too valuable not to share. So I wanted to make it available for anybody who is looking to better understand their ideal customer avatar. The principles you're about to learn have helped countless companies create better messaging and better connections with their customers. So let's dive in on how to create the perfect customer avatar.
Hey everybody, welcome to the XYZ Mission Protocols Customer Avatar. Now what this is for is to help you completely understand the target demographic that you're gearing to market towards. So let's go ahead and dive on in. In this we're going to get to know about what the pains, the fears, the desires, the motivations to buy, everything that creates the persona of a personality is going to be defined in this. So when we're crafting a message, we can make it compelling to a very specific group of people. Now, if you're trying to market to absolutely everybody, you're going to be marketing to nobody. There's an old cartoon known as The Incredibles. There's a character in it named Syndrome, and there's a big line in it where he's trying to make superpowers for everybody. And he says, when everybody is super, nobody is. And that's kind of how it is with your messaging, is if you're saying the same exact thing that everybody else is saying, then you're essentially talking to nobody. And we want to use this customer avatar as a perfect stance to be able to fix that. So you're talking to a very specific group at a very specific time with very specific messaging. So let's talk about defining the basics of a customer avatar. Now, if you've ever worked with a marketing agency, they're going to dive into some demographics, and they're going to ask the name, age, location, and gender of whoever you're going to be marketing to. Now, if they stop here, you've got a problem. And if you're defining your own avatar, if you stop here, you've also got a problem, because there's so much more that goes into creating an avatar. And if you miss these important details, you don't know who to talk to anymore. You're just kind of going to be putting out generic messages to everybody. The problem with generic messages is they're designed to blanket a huge audience. So you can get more generic with your messaging if you've got a massive crowd that already knows who you are. However, most of the time you don't. So what you want to do is the smaller the crowd, the stronger the messaging, and the more precise you can talk to them, and the more conversational you can get with it. So let's talk about some things here. We've got the first customer avatar worksheet. If you haven't downloaded it yet, make sure you go download it, print it out. I always recommend doing this at least on paper the first time. And what you're going to do is you're going to turn to this very first page. And in here, we've got different demographics. We've got the company, the name, the age. Let's start diving into this. The company is going to be a fictitious company. And what we want to do with this company is just kind of define where this persona would be working at. What are they going to be doing at this job? So we're also going to give them a name. I always like to talk about an alliteration when it comes to a name, like Awesome Amanda or Big Truck Billy or something along the lines of that, where you have a couple letters that actually kind of tie into each other and become a very memorable type of acronym. Let's talk about age too. Now, a lot of times when you're defining the demographics, you want to market to everybody because the bigger the pool means the more income, right? Wrong. Sadly, that does not work like that. So what you want to do is actually define who you're marketing to. And what we get a lot is, well, I'm marketing between 18 years old and 70 years old. Essentially, you're saying I'm marketing to absolutely everybody. But, for example, let's take climbing gear. Now, you sometimes have a 90-year-old who's doing rock climbing and mountain climbing and all that kind of stuff, but they're usually fairly rare. What you usually see is this is a demographic that usually lands in the mid-20s, early 30s. Sometimes you get into the 40s and 50s, but it starts to dwindle off the older they get. So you want to figure out what you're actually going to be saying to these people, and the messaging is going to change from what you say to, say, a 25-year-old versus a 45-year-old. So the more you can hone in on this, the better. And you can actually have an avatar for a 25 group and a 45 group. That is completely fine. Let's also talk about marital status. Now, marital status is one that is often overlooked. A lot of people are like, it doesn't matter if they're single or married or divorced or anything. I'll market to everybody. But let's put this one in the sense of a realtor, because realtors will use this demographic quite often. Most companies will actually once you start digging into it. But consider this. If you're trying to sell a house to a young couple, what age are they going to be at? A lot of times they're going to be newlyweds. They're going to be roughly in their 20s, maybe early 30s or something like that. And they're looking for maybe a startup townhome, for example. Or maybe they've started having kids and they're looking for a small single family home. Now this is starting to become more relevant, isn't it? For example, if they've got 5 kids, then you're going to be showing big houses. If they've got 2 kids, you might be able to get away with smaller houses. If they're in a higher income level, then you might be showing expensive houses. If they're in a lower income level, you might be showing townhomes. So all of this stuff starts to come into play, and it really helps you define who you're going to be marketing to. For example, maybe you have a large family with high income. That's going to be a different avatar than if you have a small family with low income. Or imagine a bachelor. Is a rich bachelor? Did he just make it big and sell some software and he made millions? Or is he just a bachelor that likes to go hanging out with his friends on the weekends? All of that stuff will define what that realtor is going to market to, for example. Now let's get into location. Location's also going to matter because a house in California is going to be different than a house in New York. And even the personality is going to be different. Imagine these scenarios: California, New York, and Utah. You know what? Let's even throw Texas in there. Think of all the personality traits, how much they differ from one state to another. Now think about like Oklahoma. What kind of person buys from in Oklahoma? All of this kind of stuff changes how you're going to talk to each avatar. And that's why it becomes so important on why you can't just talk to everybody. Now, when we're defining this, we also want to talk about occupation and job title. For example, a lot of times we do web development here. And most of the time we're thinking like, oh, we're going to be talking to the business owner, and what's the business owner going to be asking? What kind of questions are they? Let's go ahead and craft messaging to a business owner. Now consider this. What if it's actually the secretary who's been tasked with finding a website design company? Now the messaging to the business owner is going to be drastically different than the messaging for a secretary who's been tasked with it. Another thing that we want to take into consideration is if we're talking to the entrepreneur who's working on the business and trying to build this business, they're going to be using different terminology than a secretary who this is just another to-do list that's been added to their plate and they don't want to do it anyway. This could be very different messaging depending on how we do it. One's got a different pain point than the other. And we'll get into pain points here in just a minute. What's the education level? Are you dealing with somebody who never finished high school? Are you going to be talking to somebody who's just finished college? Are you going to be talking to somebody who's got a PhD? All of these different scenarios change how you talk to each person. Let's also talk about important notes. Now, important notes are really good if you have a very specific thing that you want to add to them. Like, for example, this group never uses this type of word. This group never says something like this. Any type of strange details that can really help the company, those are what go right here. So make sure if you find some weird fact out about a demographic, add it into the important notes because this can actually be a make or break of a sale. For example, if you're marketing to a tech company and you never know how to use specific tech words, that could completely break the deal because this company, this group uses tech words like crazy and you're not using them. So make sure you note that. Now, all of this stuff's important, but there is a whole another layer to this onion. And we're going to keep on peeling off the pieces of this onion until we figure out who this avatar really is. Now, over here on this section, if you've downloaded this, you're going to see a big section right here called the bio. And we're actually going to go ahead and skip this for now, and we're going to come back to this at the very end. Let's talk about pains and frustrations. Now, this is probably one of my favorite parts to address. It's not by any means the most important. It's just another aspect of the customer avatar. However, this one happens to be one of my favorite parts. And it's one that I just feel like I understand the best, and I can grasp onto pains a lot faster than other parts of it where I have to really dig in and do some really strong research on it. So this one I really kind of geek out on, and I have a lot of fun working on pains and frustrations. So let's move into identifying common problems that your customers face. Identifying common problems your customers face. Now, this is going to be something where we fill in very surface level stuff right at first. I need a CRM that's easy to add names to. That's a surface level issue. Or, for example, let's take an example in the beauty industry. I want to do my hair to look pretty. That's going to be one that would be used for like a beauty salon or something like that. But we want to start digging in a lot further to this because there's going to be a whole nother aspect that they're actually trying to identify. For example, if we look at it like the surface level of what they will tell people is, I want to do my hair to look pretty. Now, if we take away that one and we dig another layer down into it, they might have a stronger issue of like, my hair isn't as rich and vibrant as it used to be. I wish it had that silky smooth texture it used to. Now we're onto something. Now we're starting to learn about that pain, something that hurts, something that's really painful. But can we take it into another layer? Can we push it further? Let's ask another question and say, what else could this lead into? And when we start really prying into this and really trying to figure out what we're working with, what we might find out is they feel that their hair isn't as pretty and as lush as it used to be. It has a strange texture, and they don't feel as pretty as they used to be in their college years. Maybe they don't feel as desirable as they did in their college years. Boom! We just found a really, really painful issue. Those kinds of issues that they struggle with, that they can't get past, but they will not tell anybody. They don't want anybody to know this feeling. That's the kind of stuff that allows you to talk directly to them and say, look, I understand what you're going through. This is something that we're dealing with, and we understand you. We understand your problems. That's the stuff you want to really dig into and really get to the root of. Let's talk about differentiating between real pain and metaphorical pain. Now, both of these can go on this list. That's no problem. You can have both of them on the list, and you can even have different avatars for different reasons. But let's talk about physical pain first. Now, physical pain could be something like for a dentist. The dentist might have somebody who says, I have a toothache. Well, that's a real pain, and it's a very surface level one. There's probably not going to be a lot of layers to peel into. They've got a toothache and they want a solution for it as quickly as possible. Now, what's nice about this avatar is if you build it out properly as a dentist even, when they're just dealing with physical pain, then they'll still choose you. And let's use a chiropractor. Their back hurts. They want their back to be fixed. They don't want their back to hurt anymore. That is another physical pain. But depending on how you position your company, depending on how you give out information, and depending on how you talk to your avatar and say, I understand you completely. I know exactly what you're going through. I know how to deal with the problem, that specific pain you're dealing with. That's why they will choose you. Okay? So there's a difference between the physical and the metaphorical pain. The metaphorical pain is the one we just went into about like not feeling as desirable as used to. The physical pain is an actual pain. Okay? Now you want to be able to understand what you're actually dealing with. If you can dig past a toothache, let's play with the toothache. I've got a toothache. I want it fixed. That is an actual pain. But what is it that's causing the tooth pain? Maybe it's that they've got like a degenerative tooth disorder, okay? Or something along the lines of that. So now they've got that's like, oh, my tooth is actually decaying, causing tooth pain. Now let's really, really dig into this one. What if it is that they have this tooth pain that they want to be solved right away, but it's happening a lot. And it's not the same tooth. It's happening to multiple teeth. And what they're actually feeling is an embarrassment to smile. Because now you've taken a physical pain and you've found the metaphorical pain behind it. And if you can solve that, if you can make that person excited to smile again, you're going to talk directly to them. You're going to say, I get you, I understand you, and I can solve your problem. And have proof, have viable testimonials and everything to back up that you've solved this problem. You've taken people who have trouble smiling because they're embarrassed of it and giving them that new smile. That's a new outlook to life in general right there. You've just gone way deep and solved a big problem for this person. So that's why you can go from a very surface level pain and dig way down into some really deep set stuff. And when you do that, you understand that person inside and out. All right, let's talk about hopes, dreams, and desires. This one is a really fun section to kind of dive into and start to really dissect and figure out. So we want to understand what customers are running away from and what they're running towards. We also want to understand the concept of selling experiences and not just products. And we want to see how the services align with the customer's aspirations. So let's go ahead and start with understanding what customers are running towards. Now, customers are always running away from something and they're running towards something. And if they're not, you need to start pushing that pain that we hit a little bit early, because that will give them something to run away from. Now, when we're talking about selling the concept of experiences, that is where you can actually give them something to run towards. For example, in marketing, there is a big saying that says, you sell the sizzle, not the steak. Now, of course, we're going to be talking about something like a grill for this one. And when you're talking about selling the sizzle, not the steak, think about this. You have an old grill that when you start it up, it stinks, it smells horrible, there's smoke going everywhere, there's fire that sometimes billows up and maybe singes off your eyebrows. I don't know, but you hate that grill. You want to get away from it. That is something to run away from, right? So the person says, I need a new grill. Now, do they actually need a new grill? Yes, that is an actual, real issue that they have. They've got a problem here that they want to solve, right? But now let's talk about what type of grill they want to buy. They want to move down that customer journey and start progressing. But say you're in an industry that sells very high-priced grills, very expensive grills. Now, this person is going to different places and price shopping, comparing this feature, that feature. Now think of it this way. The saying that facts tell, stories sell. And let's tie that in with the analogy of you sell the sizzle, not the steak. Does this person just want a new grill that doesn't catch on fire every time they use it? Probably. That's probably a pretty good motivation to buy a new grill. But now imagine them standing out there on their back patio, their deck, or wherever they've got that grill. They've got that steak on there. It's giving that little sizzle right there. They're watching the kids play out in the yard. It's a nice sunny day. They're feeling really good. And they want to be out there. They want to enjoy that experience. They're bringing their family together. They're bringing friends over. They're having a good time. And all in the background is hearing that sizzle of the steak. Now suddenly you have a whole new message that you can actually market to. You've got a whole new demographic to go after. You're not just selling a grill, you're selling a full experience. And if you can market your messaging in that way to say, this is what you get when you buy our grill, you get this whole experience, that is where you're starting to sell the experiences. And that's going to take us right into this next section of defining the avatar. What they actually need. This is going to be a big aspect of the needs section. So go ahead and turn to your worksheet on needs, and we're going to be talking about that. We just got done selling the sizzle over benefits. So people will care about the propane tank size, whether it's a direct gas line, the size of the grilling surface, all of those types of things that say like, oh, that's exactly what I want. That's over the top, right? All of that comes secondary to the experience. If you can sell the experience, you now set yourself apart. If you're, for example, a grill company, that would set you apart from all the other grills that are just saying, hey, we have this propane tank size, we've got this grill surface. Yours has all that stuff too. But attached to your messaging that they saw before they even came into the location to buy that grill is the story of the experience of the sizzle while the kids are playing in the yard, right? Now what they're going to do is they're going to bypass all those other grills and they're going to come right to yours because yours made a promise that they get all of this amazing stuff right there. So we want to talk about the real needs versus perceived needs. The real need is they need a new grill. That one's easy. Their grill is catching on fire every single time they use it, and they need a new grill. That one's easy. Like, put that on line 1. Grill catches on fire, and we need a new one. As you continue to push down into the needs, talk about the grill size. For example, if we go back to the very first slide, how big is their family? That family size is going to dictate how big of grill size they need. Let's talk about income level. The income's going to say what kind of grill can they afford. Can they afford a small grill or can they afford a big grill? Okay. How big is their house? What kind of car do they drive? Does it say luxury? If they're driving a BMW and they live in a big house or something like that, there's a good chance they might want a higher quality, nice grill. But if they're driving like a little tiny car that's kind of falling apart, they might want a smaller grill. That's just something that's really affordable. There's nothing wrong with any of these backgrounds. But what you need to understand is who you're marketing to. Because if your message is marketing to the guy who's running the little falling apart car because he doesn't like to spend money and he'd rather drive it into the ground, this messaging for this really big elaborate grill is not going to resonate with him. And if you're marketing to this guy with this little falling apart car and you're trying to sell it to this guy who has this big elaborate house and the nicest of everything, he's going to think it's a cheap grill. So that's why the type of messaging that you put behind this has to match who you're going for. Now, say you've got both of those. You sell to both of those people, right? You might have an avatar for the guy who likes to run into the ground. You can talk about the most effective, long-lasting grill that's on the market, that it will long outlast the name of the grill. It'll outlast everything. It's built like a tank and it will just keep on going forever, right? Or you can market about how luxurious this is and how it gives the smoothest cook surface that you'll ever have, and everything's well balanced and heated in the right spots at the right times, and it's got all these extra things that make your life more enjoyable, that make your friends say ooh and ah, this is amazing, I wish I had one. Okay, so that is the difference between real needs versus perceived needs. Okay, and that is how you craft a message that resonates with each one of those types of people. All right, let's keep moving on. Motivations to buy. Now, everybody has different reasons why they want to make a purchase. They have different things that cause them to want something, okay? And a lot of times, when it comes to motivations to buy, they have different ways they want to buy. Some people like to buy over the phone. Some people like to buy online. Some people like to buy something that ships quick. Some people like to talk about quality and so forth. The reasons behind it will change per person, okay? And what's going to be a nice thing is as you continue to craft different avatars for different purposes, you're actually going to start covering a lot of these. But the biggest reason why you have to understand the motivations to buy are going to be to tailor your messages to the customer's desires. Now, as you've noticed, we've talked a lot about crafting messages to specific needs and desires. And that is because the better you craft your messages, the more income you can bring in, the bigger the client base you can have, because you're talking to that very specific person, okay? So what you want to do is once they make a purchase, because you spoke directly to them, you know exactly what they want, you know exactly how to say it, and you say, our company is the only one that can provide this type of value, that is where you start moving from tailored messages to building rapport through targeted communication. The more they see your message, the more the message resonates with them. The more the message resonates with them, the more they get to know your specific company. And then the more they get to know your specific company, the higher chances they have to buy from you versus any of your competitors. This is what's cool about a customer avatar, is you essentially make all of your competitors obsolete because you're the one providing the information, you're the one providing the messaging, you're the one painting the picture, you're the one providing the results that they're looking for and giving them exactly what they're asking for. So when they go in to make a purchase between you, your client, this service, that service, whatever it is, they choose you because not only are you always on the top of their mind, but you've already started to solve their problems. And once you've already started to solve their problems, that is when you really make an impact with your customer. All right, purchasing behavior. Now this one's actually really interesting because there are a lot of different types of purchasing behaviors that people experience when they're moving into something. So go ahead and change to your purchasing behavior worksheet, and we're going to start digging into this and building out the different persona for this. Now, as I had mentioned in the previous section, is people buy in different ways for different reasons, and they need different messaging to attract them to that. So different types of purchasing behavior usually comes into the difference between high-priced and low-priced items. And when you're looking into this, you're going to go on to either the high spectrum or you're going to go on to the low spectrum, okay? So there isn't much benefit of being right in the middle. So you usually either want to be the highest priced or the lowest priced. But the value and the messaging that you have has to match whichever side you land on, okay? So let's talk about the benefits of being low priced. You might be asking, whoever wants to be the cheapest? Well, I can answer that one for you. Walmart. Walmart has positioned themselves as the low priced leader. Now, if you look at it on being the highest priced, that's fine. But what comes with being the highest priced? The perception of value, okay? So if you're going to be on the higher price, you have to have that perception of having something special about you and your company, okay? This is important. You have to have something that separates you to be very important. Now, not everybody can either be the lowest price or the highest price. The market is just too big for that, right? Which makes most people land somewhere in the middle. And the problem with being in the middle is that you become a commodity. Let's go back to the dentist, for example. If you have a dentist that drills a tooth for a price, and you have another dentist that drills a tooth for a price, and you have another dentist that drills a tooth for a price. Now, let's say this price is negligible, say between $50 to all three of them. Which one are you going to choose? You're probably going to go with the one that is probably cheaper or has an opening, right? There's no reason to choose the different one. Why would you choose the highest price of those three that are all in the middle instead of going with the cheapest? I mean, cheap and speed, that's really all you got, right? Now, let's take that same dentist and talk about the one that you've seen online, the one that has ads showing all of the time. Every time you go on, you see an ad for them. But not only that, they have talked about and educated you on the problems with a toothache. They have educated you on the difference on anesthetic. They have taught you about their relaxing environment and the anesthetics they use and all of this other stuff that teaches you about how well they do their job, how well they work, the satisfaction of their clients. They've got testimonials. They've got a beautiful website. They've got all of this stuff that they're giving you to help you educate. Now, when you have to choose between these three doctors, you're likely going to just naturally migrate to the one that's already started to help solve your problem. And the more you go down into this, the more authority you create in your marketing, the more you can actually drive your prices up over the long run to become one of those higher price leaders. Because you're now building that base to become that. But in the meantime, while you're in that middle zone, you have to say, who am I actually marketing to? Who am I going for? And how is it going to help them? And how is it going to change what they're doing? And how is this going to attract them to me? The more of these questions you can answer, the more likely they're going to choose you because you've already been solving their problems. They've already got a relationship with you, even though it's one-sided. You may not know them, but they know you. Okay, so that's the difference between strategies between high price and low price is if you're going to be in that middle section, have a reason for being there. This is known as positioning. This is a thing for a whole nother segment because it is actually pretty big. But if you're going to be in that middle, you have to be unique. You have to have something that only you offer and they can only get it from you, and then you have to educate them on that. But in a nice, powerful way. Like give them before you get to ask for that purchase. Okay, let's move into the role of post-purchase communication. For example, email campaigns or other types of follow-up. Now, whenever somebody makes a purchase, they're going to have some type of buyer's remorse. However, let me clarify that the smaller the purchase, the smaller the amount of buyer's remorse. If you're buying a $9 item, you might be like, oh, that was a bad purchase, but oh well, it was $9, right? But if you're buying a house or a car or something very expensive, you have to have more reason to justify that. So people buy off of emotion and then they justify with logic. So they buy it because they really want it and they think it's going to be awesome, but then logic kicks in, right? So they buy something that they really want. This happens with the car industry all the time. People buy a car because it's cool, it's fast, it makes them feel young, it makes them feel awesome. And then they drive it to their friends and their friend goes, how much was it? And you're like, well, it came with a bunch of features, and I mean, it's got the heated seats, it's got the nice dashboard, it's got a heated steering, and you start rambling off all of these features that it's got, trying to justify it so your friend doesn't go like, that was a dumb purchase. Nobody wants to make a bad choice. So they have a lot of buyer's remorse that you kind of have to come over, even if it's kind of masked and they're trying to hide it. Almost everybody has some type of remorse when they make a purchase, but a lot of times if it's a cheap purchase, it's a very quick one. Sometimes they don't even think about it, but if it's a more expensive one, they don't want to be wrong on their purchase. So the post-communication here can actually continue to enforce how smart of a decision they have made and how it's going to benefit their life, how it's going to solve their problem, and this messaging is going to be reinforced about how great this project is, or the product, or whatever it is you're selling. All of this stuff comes in post-communication. All right, let's move on. Now we come into objections. Now, with most companies, most types of industries, you're going to run into some type of objection, whether it's a flooring company, or it's a roofer, or a dentist, or a beauty salon, or just any of that stuff. There is going to be objections. And one in our industry, we're in marketing, of course, and one of the objections we get is, let me talk to my wife, let me talk to my husband, let me talk to my business partner, let me talk to this person, let me talk to that person. And what that objection is saying, I haven't got enough information to make a choice or a decision on my own that I feel comfortable with. Okay? So go ahead and start jotting down the objections, and then you can start going deeper and deeper into those objections and figure out what they're looking for. For example, in the car industry, you might have somebody who says, this is too expensive, I can't afford it. In the beauty industry, it might be like, I don't know if I want my hair colored, it might not look good on me, and so on and so on. Try to think of as many objections as you possibly can that's going to cause the customer to hesitate in their purchase. Okay? A lot of times it will be pricing is usually what the objection is up front. They almost always say pricing. However, it is rarely pricing. Sometimes it is. It can be a legitimate price issue. However, what it usually comes down to is that they aren't completely comfortable making that purchase. They're afraid it's going to hit their status in some way, shape, or form. They're afraid they're going to show somebody and have them be like, dude, that was a dumb purchase. Now that hit their status. Or I wouldn't have never bought that. That is another hit on their status, right? And that is what they're trying to avoid. They do not want to have these objections always kind of go to more of a deep set reason on why they're making that objection. And we want to figure out what all of those are so we can address them in the copy of our content, in the copy of our video, or in the scripts of our videos, or just any way we're putting out messages to this customer. We want to address these objections and be very proactive in addressing them, because the more you can cover up front, the less they're going to object later on. And when you finally get to it, you finally get the important objections that are uncommon. Those are the ones that are really going to help you close a deal. Because once you say, I completely understand you so much that it was almost like I was reading your mind by answering these questions that just keep coming up one after the next. I've covered them all. So when you finally get down to the table with them, all of them have either been completely answered already, and they move into that 4% that's ready to buy, and they're like, take my money, I'm ready to go, you've answered everything. Or you're down to just a handful of real objections. And once you're down to those handful of real objections, that's where you can really show that you understand who you're talking to. Now, let's go ahead and turn the page and talk about where they hang out. Now, where they hang out is always one of those that's kind of a funny one, because everybody says social media. That's like always the first answer. Where do they hang out? Facebook. Where do they hang out? LinkedIn. Where do they hang out? Instagram. But as you'll find out, that is just one of those surface level things. It's like saying what's the age, right? It's important, it's needed, but it's only a very small fraction of that overall puzzle. So we want to talk about where they actually spend their time. And that is going to be, where do they hang out? Oh, they hang out on Facebook. Okay, well, what groups do they hang out in? What areas do they interact with on Facebook? Are they in the marketplace? Are they in a group? Like, are they in the messaging section? A lot of times they'll just jump on Facebook to use the messenger. Maybe that's something that you want to address in your advertising, for example, is maybe message-based marketing. Now, once we know where they're hanging out, whether it's a message board or it's a Facebook group or it's a LinkedIn group or TikTok or just anywhere they're hanging out, once we understand this section, we can now start engaging with these customers. And the engagement is a big part that we want to talk about, because the more you can get your message in front of them and show that you understand who they are and what they're looking for and what their pains, hopes, and desires are, the more you can talk directly for that person and build that rapport. So engaging with them on these platforms is incredibly important. And what's going to also be a big portion of this is where, especially on these platforms that are anonymous, like Reddit, for example, they will usually start talking about those core things that we were talking about earlier that nobody wants to talk about, nobody wants to identify with. Once their name's not associated with it, you'd be amazed what you can learn. You can go into these different groups and find out what it is that these people are actually struggling with, these pain points that they just don't want anybody to know. You slap an anonymous tag on their name, suddenly they'll start talking about it. So they have a problem that they're trying to solve. So by engaging with these customers in these environments, you can actually figure out what they are actually trying to understand, what problems they're trying to solve, and then you can, again, put that in your messaging. The more of this stuff you put in your messaging, the more you resonate with them. The more they say, you totally understand me. You get this. You understand me, and I want to do business with you. I don't want to do business with any of these other companies out there. I want to do business with the company that understands me. And that is where you're going to position yourself. All right, so go ahead and fill out the section on where they hang out. This is going to be really powerful. So don't just think surface level. Go deeper and deeper and deeper into it until you've completely understood where they're hanging out and even why they hang out there. What is it about that area that attracts them? Because if you can understand that, you just unleash a whole nother aspect of psychology to that person and how to market to them and how to speak to them. And on top of that, when you understand where they hang out at, you can start to understand the terms they use, the way they address different people, the way they communicate with other people. And you can actually start crafting your message to talk exactly like they do. So when they start reading your messaging, when they start seeing your ads, when they start listening to your videos, you are actually speaking in a way that resonates with them, because that is how they talk. You are now one of them. You're one of their people, and they're going to resonate with you, and they're going to create a connection with you. So when your competitor comes in, and they're speaking the wrong language because they're not spending time on these places. They're not interacting with their customers. They're just saying, oh, regular messaging will work. Everybody else is saying this. I'll say it too. When they're all doing that, and you're coming in saying, I'm going to speak a very specific way to a very specific person. I'm going to talk to you, not everybody. That is when your messaging really changes. That is when people start working with you. All right, let's move on. All right, compiling these insights into a bio. Now, as you remember, I said skip this part at the very beginning and we're going to come back to it. And this is the time where we're going to come back to this. We have now actually learned about this avatar. We know who we're talking about. As you know, you've been doing all this research. You probably feel like you're starting to get to know this as an actual person. There might be even some people that you know that fit this persona. And you're like, oh, that reminds me of this very specific person. Oh, this is how this person I know talks. And with all of these different traits that we've filled out, all of these different hopes, dreams, desires, the way they talk, the way they communicate, the way they interact, all of this stuff comes together, and we can actually start to build an actual bio for this person and actually say, this person could be a real person. They've got kids, they've got a house, they've got a car. This is how they talk. This is where they hang out. This is where they work. This is the kind of stuff that they look for. This is the stuff that motivates them to buy. All of this stuff, the further you can take it, the further you can go into that onion, the better. And then build a story around it. And when you build a story around it, that is when this person, in a sense, this personality comes alive. And now, when you're writing your message, you just think, who's sitting across the table from you? Who is this person? And you talk to them like they are a real person, and you will be amazed at how much your copy changes. You'll almost feel it come alive. You're like, I am talking to a person. I'm not just coming up with some generic messaging. I'm talking to this person. So let's take it one step further with that. As I had mentioned, give the avatar a creative name, like Big Truck Billy, for example. It's kind of goofy and it's kind of funny, but those alliterations on the names will help you remember them, right? So when you're writing your message, you can say, yeah, this is the truck, we're going to be writing a campaign for Big Truck Billy. Now all of a sudden, this personality is sitting across. Now you don't have to do an alliteration for the name. You can come up with a real name. Those are just real easy to remember when you have 5, 6, or 7 avatars sitting in front of you and you need to choose who you're writing to or the message you're putting together, the campaign you're putting together. It does help you remember it. But now once it's done, it will almost be like the copy writes itself because you're writing in a conversational tone versus just trying to blanket the media, hit everybody, try to write to the billions of people out there instead of this small little group, right? So that's why it's important to figure out who they are, where they work, what they do, how many kids they've got, what they like, where they like to buy, and you almost in a sense now can take your content and you can create the vacation destination. You can write your content like you're selling the vacation. You're not selling the plane ticket anymore. You're not selling the airport. You're not selling the plane that they're flying on. You're selling that location. You're giving them a dream of sitting on the beach on a hot sunny day, lounged back, drinking a margarita while they can hear the waves crashing against the rocks. You're selling that to them metaphorically versus what everybody else is where they're trying to sell the plane ticket, right? So this is how important this stuff has become. Okay, so we've gone over a lot of stuff in a very short time, and we've just been piling on all of this different information. But I want to say, all of this information doesn't do anything if you don't actually apply it. So I would like to challenge you to actually take the time and fill out your customer avatar. Like really flesh it out. Take all that basic information, write it down. Get another printout. Take that basic information, go another layer deep. Print out another one if you have to. Take that information, go another layer deep. Just keep going so deep until you feel like you absolutely hit that core and say, aha, that's what this person is. That's what this person is looking for. That is what motivates them to buy from me. That is what they're trying to solve. That is the actual pain point. It's not just the surface thing everybody else is talking about. This is what they're actually trying to solve. And do that, and you'd be amazed how much your marketing messages change on everything. Your website content will change. Your ads content will change. Your video scripts will change. Everything will change based on talking to this very specific person now versus trying to talk to everybody. And now what you can do is take all these different avatars and write different messages to each of them and actually have messages that work, a lot of different messages that work versus one big one that does nothing. And that's the power of the avatar. Now, I know it's a lot of work. It is plenty of work, and I get that. And that is actually why we are here. So what I'd like to do is say, if this is getting too much for you, it's too stressful, or you just don't have time to do it, or you don't have the manpower to do it, or any of those different reasons that is preventing you from building the company that you know you deserve, contact us. Let XYZ help you build this avatar. Let us help you craft this amazing messaging so you can start resonating with these avatars, which become real customers, and watch your business grow. So I'd also like to invite you to use our free 1-month trial of the Mission Control CRM. That is where you take these people who are actually you're talking to, these customers that want your services. They need a place to live. And that's where the CRM comes in at. That is where you can actually put these people into it and follow up with them, craft follow-up messages, those follow-up emails we were talking about, create the landing pages, and see how your ads are performing. All of that stuff comes into play with the Mission Control CRM. So that does it. We're more than happy to work with you. Try the CRM, see how it works out for you. Watch your business grow because of that. And I just want to thank you for the time that you've spent with me. I know this was a fairly big endeavor to take on, and now you've got homework to do, and there's a lot going on. But I want to tell you that if you actually put this into place, if you actually do everything that we just went over, your business is going to change like wildfire moving through a dry forest. It's going to be incredible. but it only makes a change if you do the work. But here's what's great about it. Most of your competitors aren't doing the work. They just have a business front up in front of people, and they're hoping people come in. If you actually take the time to put this into play, your business is going to bury theirs. So make sure you're doing the work. Make sure you put in the time. Give it the effort it needs, and watch how amazing it is, and watch your business grow. Again, guys, I'm Adam with XYZ Marketing. I hope this has been hugely beneficial to you, and I hope you use these resources. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me and ask those questions online. Give us a call, come in, anything like that. We'd be more than happy to help. I'll talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.